Okay, so we're going to talk about first trimester considerations when talking about your exercise program. Again, just want to reiterate that not all of this is going to neatly fit into the first trimester for all women, but most women. But for most women, these are kind of the things you have to think about. I'm also going to split this up into talking about trained women and untrained women, because that does make a really big difference. And we do have different kind of guidelines for women who were doing something before and women who were doing exercise before, have gotten pregnant and think, shit, like I really need to do some exercise now. If you were exercising before, so first of all, let's think about like the big picture of the first trimester. In your first trimester, you may begin to show by the end of the first trimester, but right now you don't have a belly to contend with. Your abdominal muscles are not being stretched out around kind of this big basketball. And so they're still all in kind of a straight line where they're supposed to be. From your rib cage to your pelvis. And so everything's still kind of aligned. Pelvic floor, diaphragm, and then all the core, the kind of abdominal and back muscles are making this canister. So your core is not like compromised just yet. So that's not such a big issue. A few things though that you do have to start thinking about in your first trimester is that you've got this whole cocktail of hormones just going whoosh like into your body. Things are going to start feeling a bit different. You might feel a little bit weaker, and you may need to like prepare yourself for those changes later on down the line. If you're lifting heavy weights or doing lots of impact, you may need to start thinking about how that might impact your pelvic floor now and later on down the line, and how you might want to adjust that. Your heart rate is probably going to go up really, really fast, and that's because of a phenomenon called underfill, which I'll make a separate video about. Don't feel alarmed by this, but you will have to change, adapt your training program because of that. And then you're going to have, or a lot of women have, fatigue or nausea, which is probably going to affect how you perform in your training, how much you want to train, how motivated you feel, how much you can do, and so on. So let's get a little bit more specific. If you were doing exercise before pregnancy, at this stage, not much has to change. Now, if you're doing a really like full contact sport, like I was doing jiu-jitsu before pregnancy. If you're doing rugby, something with a lot of chance of falling or getting hit or hurting yourself, these are the kind of sports that just need to go. It's not really a grey area here. Like you could probably get away with some of it early on, but they're probably the sports that you're gonna feel less inclined towards as well. You start to feel more protective of your body, but again, but that's a personal choice. But most sports, like even the more intense stuff, the more high impact stuff, if you're doing CrossFit, if you do HIIT, if you run, whatever your kind of chosen sport is, even if it's higher impact and and more intense, you probably don't really need to change your exercise program that much. If any changes you do make are more in magnitude and not in kind. So for example, CrossFit is a really good example because there's so many different things in CrossFit. you don't have to stop squatting, or you don't have to stop doing the strength training component and lifting heavy weights. You just might need to lift lower weights now and adapt the amount that you're lifting in order to kind of maintain the integrity of the pelvic floor and all of your abdominal muscles, and prepare for later stages in pregnancy. But check out, I have a separate video on weightlifting during pregnancy that gives you all of those guidelines. If you're doing something high impact, you might not need any real changes. Many women start to feel towards the end of their first trimester that things like running, that are like high impact, lots of impact with the floor, do cause a bit of like hip or back pain. And if that's the case, just stop. Lots of women ask me if it's okay to run during pregnancy, and we go through the guidelines, and then half an hour into the conversation they say, it kind of hurts, like I get this real ache in my right hip or whatever. If that's the case, you don't need me to tell you anything that causes pain during pregnancy. Just don't do it. And I know that's really hard if you love running or whatever else it is that you do, but you have to protect your body at this time, and you have to think about how it could impact you later on down the line. Some women find that they can't run anymore from 10 weeks. Some women manage to get to 6 months. It's not something that's cut in stone, like stop running at this stage. It's gonna change at so many, it's going to depend on so many factors, and again it's going to be more about magnitude rather than kind. So if you're running marathons, maybe you're going to have to cut down to half marathons and then down to like 10Ks, and you know, before you stop running completely, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be just doing, if you start to get achy hips at 8 kilometers, but at 7 kilometers you still feel great, so run 7 kilometers, and then next month run 6 kilometers. You know, you can always do a little bit less, rather than most people either do everything all out or they do nothing. So keep things, try to explore that gray area in between. You know, your HIIT classes and things like that. Now, something that you are going to have to take into account is your heart rate at this time, and your body temperature. So if you're pushing yourself really, really hard in like a CrossFit workout, or in a HIIT class, or in a running class, or whatever, or spinning class, or whatever it is, if you're trained, if you're already doing this kind of exercise, we don't want to push ourselves that like 100% that we can always do, that we always used to be doing. We want to just reel back to sort of 70%. Just leave something in the tank. Nowadays, in the past we've talked a lot about heart rate, like don't go over 140 beats per minute, but that's actually a kind of, it's a bit of a arbitrary figure. 140 beats per minute is going to feel very different from one woman to the next. So for some women it's going to feel like nothing, for some women it's going to feel like their heart's going to explode. So we really want to stick to kind of received, like your personal exertion level and how you feel. So you kind of want to be aiming for a 7 out of 10. You should still be able to hold a conversation. So that means that, you know, instead of not doing your CrossFit WOD, you can just do it more slowly and just with a bit less weight and just chill out a little bit. But you can still do what you were doing before. And this is important to keep you exercising. It's important to keep exercising. It's important to keep moving. However, if you, we do want to watch body temperature. We want to watch, you know, our heart rate going up and things like that. So just keep hydrated and don't just, this is a time to learn how to not push yourself too hard, and to just reel back a little bit. Now, if you weren't exercising before, and you want to take up some form of exercise, you might want to just do stick to more, if you're not fit and you've never really done exercise before, you want to stick to like low impact, more gentle forms of exercise. So swimming might be a really great option. Just some gentle cardiovascular exercise, like a cross trainer, a yoga class, a prenatal class. This isn't really a time to start CrossFit or start running or start, doing something that's higher impact, because you don't know how your body really responds to that. But having said that, if you can find a really good prenatal trainer, strength training can be totally adapted to pregnancy, and it can be really, really beneficial during pregnancy. But it's quite hard to find someone like that. So you are probably going to be battling a lot of, whether you're trained or untrained, you're probably going to be dealing with a lot of fatigue and nausea. So you're just going to have to adapt your training sessions to that fatigue or nausea. If you feel really crap one day, there's no point going and pushing yourself through it and then being completely exhausted for the rest of the day. Exercise should make you feel better. So if you're used to doing CrossFit and what feels good today is actually a yoga class or going for a short swim or going for a 10-minute walk, if that's going to make you feel better, then that's what you should do. You do want to start thinking about the fact that you've got all these different hormones, and your joints and pelvic floor are maybe going to start getting a little bit weaker. So you just want to keep an eye out for any aches and pains, and we want to start to regulate intra-abdominal pressure, which is a really big, complicated topic that I'll start to make some other videos on. If you are a big exerciser, this is a time where you really want to start to prepare yourself psychologically for future changes later on down the line. You are going to have a big belly. You are going to not be able to do certain things, and you are going to feel more tired at times. And you are going to have to adapt your exercise routine to suit the different stages of pregnancy. So it can be quite hard to really understand that in the first trimester, and let go of some of those things that we really love to do. But it's really important to start to prepare ourselves mentally, so that it's easier to make the change later on down the line. So tune in to the next two videos, which are going to be about the second and third trimester, naturally, and I'm going to make a few videos on some more specific topics, like intra-abdominal pressure, and so on and so forth. So I hope this was helpful, and leave any questions in the comments below.